I want to make a case for something that I think most of us know we should do, but somehow never actually do. Reading. Not because it makes you look smart, not because successful people do it, but because of what's literally doing to your brain compared to what scrolling is doing to it. And once I actually understood the difference, I started treating my phone differently. So let me start with the thing we're all actually doing most of the time. Scrolling. Scrolling is doing something to your brain that most people don't realize. Every time you open Instagram, TikTok, YouTube Shorts, whatever it is, your brain gets hit with dopamine. Small hit, next post. Small hit, next video. Small hit, notification. Swipe, hit. Dr. Anna Lemke, a psychiatrist at Stanford, who wrote Dopamine Nation, she explains that this constant stimulation tips something she calls the pleasure-pain balance. Every hit feels very great in the right moment, but after each one, your dopamine baseline drops slightly, which means the next hit needs to be something more interesting, slightly more stimulating, to feel the same as the last one. And so you keep going, you keep scrolling. Not because you're enjoying it, but because your brain is chasing a baseline that cannot quite get back to. And here is what that does to your brain over time. Your ability to sit with something slow, something that doesn't give you an instant reward, gets weaker because your brain has been trained to expect stimulation constantly. The moment something isn't rewarding or interesting, you reach for your phone. The moment a task requires sustained attention, you check your notification. Gloria Mark, a researcher at US Irvine, did a measurement back in 2024, and the measures they used were stopwatches. They would record the start time and the stop time for certain people doing specific tasks. So you are on a screen where you're working in a Word doc. As soon as they get to that screen, they clicked on the start time. Soon as they turned away and checked email, they clicked stop time for the Word document and start time for the email. So back in 24, they found the average attention span on any screen to be 2.5 minutes on average. Throughout the years, it became shorter. So around 2012, they found it to be 75 seconds. And then in the last 5-6 years, they found it to average about 47 seconds. 47 seconds. And she also found that after an interruption, after you check for your phone, switch tabs, pick up a notification, it takes an average of 23 minutes to fully return to deep focus. Not 2 minutes, not 5 minutes, 23 minutes per interruption. And most of us interrupt ourselves far more often than every 23 minutes, which means, unfortunately, a lot of us never actually focused on anything. We're always carrying the residue of the last thing we checked. John Harry in Stalling Focus calls this the collapse of sustained attention. And he says it's not random. It's the predictable result of spending hours and hours every day in an environment that is designed specifically to fragment our attention. Not accidentally, by design. So that's what scrolling is doing to your brain. Now here is what reading does instead. Reading is the opposite experience in almost every way. When you sit with a book, there is no algorithm deciding what comes next. No notification pulling you out. No infinite feed with no ending. What happens is your brain settles into something that it almost never gets to do anymore. Sustained, deep, uninterrupted engagement with one single thing. Marianne Wolf, a neuroscientist who wrote The Proust and the Squid, spent her career studying what happens in the brain during reading, and what she found is remarkable. She found that reading activates more areas of your brain simultaneously than almost any other activity. Language processing, visual cortex, motor areas, emotional center, all of them firing at the same time. When you read the sentence, "She grabbed the cold metal handle," your motor cortex actually activates as though your hand is grabbing something. Your brain isn't just processing words, it's simulating the experience. You're not receiving information passively, you're participating. Here is the part that gets even more interesting. A neuroscientist at Princeton University named Uri Hasson discovered something he calls neural coupling. When you're genuinely absorbed in a book, following a character inside their story, your brain activity starts to mirror the brain activity of the person who wrote it. Not just understanding what they went through, but actually synchronizing with how they thought. You don't just read their experience, you live it. And over time, across many books, that builds something that scrolling actively destroys. The ability to be inside someone else's perspective, to think neurologically, to hold complex ideas, and find the connections between them, that's becoming harder and harder with scrolling. Marianne Wolf calls this deep reading, and she says it's becoming rarer, specifically because we're spending so much time in shallow, fragmented consumption. The more we scroll, the harder deep reading gets, because the brain adapts to what you ask it to do most of the time. Ask it to fragment constantly, it gets better at fragmenting. Ask it to go deep, it gets better at going deep. And then there's the neuroplasticity piece. Every book you read is literally rewiring your brain. Literally, new neural pathways, new patterns, new connections between ideas, new ways of processing that weren't there before. I noticed this personally, and it's honestly one of the things that made me take reading seriously. When I started reading constantly, ideas started connecting to each other in a way they hadn't been before. Something from one book would suddenly illuminate something in a completely different book. A psychology concept would explain something I had noticed in my own behavior. A story from someone's life would make sense of something I had been confused about in mine. And there is a book that was a big part of why I started sharing those ideas. It's called Show Your Work by Austin Kleon. The whole point of it is this: if you're learning things that excite you, share them. You don't have to be an expert at something. Just share what you're discovering, what you're learning. I read that and I thought, I can do that. I have lots of things to share, lots of things to say. And this channel, honestly, is a direct result of that book. Reading gave me something to say, and it can do the same for you. So how do you actually make that switch? Because I know it's easy to say read instead of scrolling, and much harder to actually do it. So here are the specific things that worked for me. The first one, phone in another room. Not silent, not face down, another room. Because the research is clear. Even having your phone visible to you reduces your cognitive ability. Just seeing it sitting there takes up mental space. When you sit down to read, put it somewhere you would have to get up to reach it. That small friction is enough to break the automatic reach. The second one starts with what actually interests you. Not what you think you should read, not the impressive book on the list, something you're genuinely curious about. Because the brain engages differently with something it actually wants to know about. And the habit builds from genuine interest, not discipline. If you love psychology, start there. If you're into creativity, start there. If you want to understand yourself better, there are entire shelves of books for that. Just start with something real. The third one, replace one specific scroll session. Not all of them. One. The one you do in bed before sleeping, the one you do in the morning, the one you do when you're waiting for something. Pick one consistent moment and put a book there instead. Cal Newport talks about this in his book, Deep Work. And the idea is this: you can't just decide to focus more. You have to design your environment to make focus the easiest choice. A book on your nightstand and your phone in another room. Design, not willpower. The fourth one, don't finish books you're not enjoying. This one sounds small, but it's so important. Most people stop reading because they pick up something they feel they should finish. So it becomes a chore. Reading isn't school. You're allowed to put it down and pick up something else. The goal isn't to finish books. The goal is to spend time inside ideas. And the right book for right now makes that feel effortless. What actually changed for me is since I started reading, you know that feeling after a very long scroll session when you've spent maybe an hour on your phone and you close the app feeling like kind of empty, like you consumed a lot but got nothing. That feeling started disappearing. Not because I became a more disciplined person who never touches his phone, but because I gave my brain something better to do than scrolling. The more I read, the more things I had to say. Things that felt like mine, thoughts that come from somewhere actual, instead of from an algorithm deciding what should I see. That's the honest difference I noticed. And look, I know this is not revolutionary advice. Read more, scroll less. Everyone's heard it, but most people who say it don't explain what's actually happening underneath. Why it feels different. Why one drains you and the other builds you. And why the switch is hard at first. That's what I wanted to show you today. And if you want to go deeper into what scrolling is specifically doing to your brain and your ability to focus, I made a whole video about that. It's called Why We No Longer Can Focus. You can click here to watch it. And it goes into the neuroscience of constant stimulation. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching.